My name is Chris Widdal. I'm going to attempt to make a digital voice recording for your images for your competition, which I think is next week. I'm going to try to do it off the cuff, so you might have a few clicks and pops and clearing of the throat. You might even have a blackbird singing or a cat meowing in the recording, but we'll do the best we can to keep it as clean as we can. I've had the images for a week now, and I've had a quick look through all of them, but I haven't made any firm decisions yet. I'm going to have a look at them on my ISO monitor. It's a high resolution monitor, 1920 by 1200 pixels, and it's profiled, so I should be able to see the images as you intended them to be seen. I'm going to hopefully pick a first, second and third in each section, and some highly commendeds and commends as I feel are suitable. So let's begin with the developer colour section, and the first image that I have to look at is called Come and Go. It's what I describe really as a travel photograph. It's well composed. I think that the viewpoint has shown the scenery to good advantage. You have cropped the scenery well to the picture space, giving an all-round good framing of the image. The exposure, I would say it's about right. You've got some light and dark areas, some shade and some sunlit areas, and you've got a subject in the middle with the town in the foreground and the ships coming and going along the fjord. The sky with a little bit of mist coming in from the top adds quite an interesting background to that. You've got your exposure about spot on, I think, for what is in the content of the image. There's just the odd little bit in the sky where the clouds are just especially bright, and you might have been able to just bring the detail out in those in your processing a little bit. Overall, it has a slight feeling of being a little bit on the flat side, even though I can see that there's light and shade, and a little bit on the cool side in the processing. And I think you could just make it a little bit more lively with just slightly better processing there. But it's a competent image, and we'll come back and look at that again with all the others and then decide on which is going to be the winner at the end of this section. The next photograph I have to look at is called In Thought. This is a studio portrait. Beautiful young girl, made up a treat, isn't she? Wearing this gorgeous fur stole and possibly a grown-up's dress, because it's all, the length of it is just draped across the floor, which I think is quite a good touch. The lighting has been set up really well. I don't know if you've done this yourself or whether this is a workshop image, but either way, you've worked with the light very well. And the exposure is good. You've got good light and shade on the face. Possibly for my taste, the model is just looking a little bit too far away, dreamy, away from the camera, and possibly just a little bit closer to looking at the camera, if not looking directly at the camera, might have been attractive. The background detail in the back cloth is quite visible. Sometimes what you can do to make that a little bit more out of focus, just bring the subject a little bit away from the background. In terms of the story that you're depicting, well, she looks like she's made up for a party, and so you've got in there some luggage as though she's going on a journey. So I'm getting mixed messages about that story. The colours are beautiful. The pink against the slightly greeny background looks very good, and I think that the simplicity of the picture works very well. Next we have Lady in Red. Wow, this is quite a dynamic picture, isn't it? And I think for a developer section, I think you've coped with that movement of the subject, and also the body shape that she's making and her expression. I think you've dealt with all of those very well. It's just a shame that as she's moved, that hair's come across that left eye and just covered that up a little bit. I don't mind that too much. Perhaps at the advanced level I might expect that to be a little bit cleaner, a little bit tidier than it is. When you've got a face and some arms and a chest, you want to look at the tonal range in each of those areas, because I find that maybe the right hand and shoulder and the inside of the left arm just a little bit on the bright side compared to the face, which is a little bit less well lit and perhaps is even in the shadow of the arm a little bit. Again, I find in this one, perhaps even more than the last one, I find that the background is a little bit intrusive. It's so very intensely red, and the textures in the background compete for me a little bit with the textures in that lace of the subject's outfit. So this is one where I particularly feel I would bring the subject away from the background and just use the colours a little bit more. You might be able to do something more to equalise the tonal range from the arms, chest, across to the shoulder and the other arm in your processing. And I think at developer level, this is, I think, the sort of things that you need to think about moving forward to how to improve that processing of your images. But again, a good attempt there. A perfect lake is the next image, and again a travel photograph with some beautiful scenery there. You've picked a lovely spot where we've got both reflections in the lake and the mountain scenery behind, so the whole of the scene is beautiful to capture. It has a few weaknesses that I think we could work through and perhaps help you to improve the next time you do this kind of shot. As in the first photograph, I think you've got some good light and shade there, but you've done some processing which has caused a halo to appear around the edge of the tree line against the mountains in the background. The mountains are really strongly contrasty, as is the sky with that little bit of cloud in there, whereas the foreground is actually slightly lacking in contrast. So I think, again, look at the way that you're processing the image, be very self-critical about how you are creating any artifacts like that haloing around the trees, and find out how to avoid that in your processing. In the foreground, I prefer that the tree on the left-hand side were not there, and so possibly if you had been able to move just a few paces to the right and take a very slightly different viewpoint, then I think the framing might have improved. And just be careful that the picture doesn't tilt a little bit. When you've got a reflection, the reflection of the trees should be exactly underneath the reflection of the actual real trees. So I think it's just got a little bit of a tilt to the right hand side in the framing. Okay, and the next photograph in this section is called Special Cottage. Intriguing title. I don't know if that's really the name of the cottage, or whether the photographer just found that to be a special place. Well, it's a very interesting building to have captured. You've captured it on a day when there's good colour. When there's plenty of sunlight, it does bring out the colours well in the subject. You've got those lovely blues in the sky and in the reflections in the water, and the boarding on the house has also shown up the textures and the colours really well, as has the turf roof. Because the lighting is so very directional and so very harsh, you have lost a little bit of detail in the shadows, and that's especially on the left hand side of the house on that gable end. I don't know if you could have brightened those up a little bit, but maybe you didn't have enough exposure to do that in the original. When it's really a contrasty scene, sometimes it can be worth taking more than one exposure and either choosing the best one or making a blend of different exposures to get the best out of the scenery. Just to the right in the central area is what appears to be another building with a turf roof, and that has some very bright highlights on it. The door is quite bright, and I think I would have suggested just darkening that down, and also darkening its reflection down as well, to give some balance, because it does become a little bit eye-catching. So that is the end of that developer section, and if you just bear with me, what I'm going to do here is just have a look at those on my lightbox now, and then I will pick out the ones that I want to give awards to. Okay, so we only got 5 pictures in that section, so I think it would be appropriate here to make a first, second and third. So in first place, I'm going to award In Thought. I think that is really a beautiful photograph, and it needs very little to make it absolutely perfect, so that's really good. In second place, I'm going to put Lady in Red, partly I think because I like the dynamic pose that you've achieved, and I think that it's quite a challenge to produce a photograph so well in those situations, and you've done it very well. And in third place, I'm going to put Come and Go. As a travel photograph, it's very good. I can see it in a brochure, and it just, for me, needs a little bit of a tweak in that processing to make it absolutely perfect. So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to come back in a minute and have a look at the next section, but I need to check the levels on this recording are okay. See you in a minute.